It is not power that claims everything in the galaxy. Strength means little. Numbers are paltry figures. No, it is the will, the drive, the determination that forges fate in defiance of what stands against it. For no man, no army can withstand one with this purity of spirit. No crusade, no ravening horde, no number of monsters, freaks, or heretics can persevere against the one who stands his ground because he knows he must not, cannot give way. There is one man in this galaxy whose resolve is beyond measure, who against all the forces of darkness and death has remained resolute throughout the ages. Older than worlds, bearer of a legacy most ancient and proud, he is stalwart, furious, and glorious. Though aches and pains and fatigue hound his heels and pervade his body, mind, and soul, he is the one who will never give up, never surrender. Brought back from the brink of death by the command of his sacred sire, he has fought against every enemy this galaxy has to offer. He has rebuilt a chapter from paltry numbers twice over. He has grappled with politicking and slaughtered Chaos champions by his own hand. He is the chosen of Sanguinius, the Lord of Angels, guided by the Sanguinor's own hand. Though Chaos tear this galaxy in half, though hordes of the Hive mind swamp across sectors, though undead automata rise from their breathless sleep, he will not surrender, he will not take a step back. He will fight because he must, because he wills it. He was once a small, frail boy, the most unlikely of beginnings. Now he is the Lord of Hosts, the last Archangel, the death that soars. He is the commander of the Blood Angels, the scion of Sanguinius, Lord of the Blood and the Regent of Imperium Nihilus. His name is Dante, and for as long as mankind draws breath in this galaxy, none shall forget it. Welcome one and all, I'm Azazel, and for better or worse, you have stumbled your way onto my video detailing Dante in Warhammer 40k. There are few who can measure up to this man, this lord, this hero. He has fought across the length and breadth of the Imperium for over 1,500 years, making him the oldest loyalist space marine that has continually been in active service, an impressive feat. Within the lore, he's also the regent of the dark half of the Imperium, Nihilus, and therefore an absolute essential character for newcomers to the hobby to learn about and understand. Therefore, what follows is an introduction to Dante in my own words for those of you who are looking to expand your knowledge of this universe. If you're an experienced veteran of the hobby, then don't be surprised if you already know all I have to introduce here. Simply listen along while you paint your models, and I hope you enjoy it. Be prepared now. Steel your hearts and gird your minds as we enter the most horrific place imaginable. The place where hope goes to die, and where thirsting gods rack the souls of billions, while directing madness on the stage of our galaxy as easily as puppeteers pull on strings. Welcome to the 41st millennium. There is a system, like so many others in our galaxy. It possesses a planet, like many systems do. Around this planet orbited two moons. It is upon one of these moons that the tale of Dante began. For this moon was a dangerous place, an irradiated battleground that still held the echoes of nuclear war 12,000 years later. Its population was small, short-lived, scabbed and marked from the radiation that permeates the planet. And yet life persevered. Among the clans that scrabbled among the dirt and dry plains of this moon, there were those that lived among the great salt waste, risking life and limb to carve out salts to sell and survive among the inhospitable nature of the moon itself. Into this clan was born Luis. For many among his clan, the continuation of lineage, of survival, was of the utmost importance. Yet for this small boy, whose mother died attempting to give birth to his baby brother, this was not the case. He dreamed of becoming an angel. Not out of glory or love or strength or power. No, this young man dreamed of protecting people. Not just those he loved, but of protecting everyone. He desired to safeguard all peoples of the Imperium. Yet his father, refused. Luis had one recourse, one option. For the time of challenge would only come once in a generation, and he would be too old for the next attempt. One night he stole away in the darkness to brave the elements, the sand and the sun, to make his pilgrimage to Angel's Fall. Like many others, he would have died along this journey, fallen to the heat of the sun and the dangers of the desert, were it not for the first appearance of the Sanguinor. This mysterious herald of Sanguinius appeared briefly, guided Luis when he needed help the most, and began the tale of Dante as all would know him. Soon thereafter, he would meet other boys, ones who dreamed of becoming angels. And so, one became three. They faced invisible irradiated pockets that could kill a human, fire scorpions that Luis would risk life and limb to save his new brothers, and thirst water, a living abomination that sucked the moisture out of its victims with a single touch. 3 would become 2, and Luis and his surviving companion Florian would inch closer to their respective destinies, to Angel's Fall. Angel's Fall would be where aspirants would go to receive judgment, to enter the trials to become blood angels and write their own fates among the stars. But to get there was no mean feat. To travel days on foot over the cracked lands is a terrible hardship. But there was one quicker way, the Wind River. For in a valley, overlooking a deep canyon, stood a spur of rock that reached into the skies. It was from this rock that Sanguinius supposedly took his first flight. In an echo of his glory, aspirants can affix wooden and leather wings to themselves and dive into the unknown. Throughout the canyon drive enormous gales, winds that can support these imitations of Sanguinius. A 10-hour flight can send an experienced flyer all the way to Angel's Fall. But it is not for the faint of heart. Wild upwinds can send flyers spinning into the rock face. A single miscalculation can see a flyer stall and drop into the rocks beneath. Blood eagles haunt the miles and miles of canyon, waiting for the easy pickings of flight-exhausted young boys to shred and tear and feast upon their bodies. Yet determination was Luis's strength, as it would ever be Dante's. He made the climb, tackled with the voracious winds, and outmaneuvered the deadly talons that haunted the canyon's sides. Exhaustion burned through his small body, and yet he made it to Angel's Fall, the place of choosing. As with all chapters, the first test is that of genetic compatibility. Those whose bodies are unable to receive the gene seed are discarded, for they will never be Astartes. Luis passed this test. Only then would the real winnowing begin. It began with games, tests of strength, of endurance, interviews with the chaplains, how graciously they accepted to defeat, or how loudly they proclaimed victory. For among the Blood Angels, the soul of the warrior is just as important as their physical abilities. One by one, the aspirants were cut down or left. What followed was more grueling indeed. Marching through the desert sands, sleep deprivation, mazes to test the intellect, challenges as squads to ascertain their bonds of brotherhood with fellow aspirants, martial lessons of the sword, shield, staff and gun, combat against the predators of Baal Secundus, and still the numbers of aspirants fell away. Yet something was very different about Luis. While his peers applauded and celebrated at every victory, he mourned for the lost. Even during his trial of war, which pitted aspirants against one another, he employed strategies to claim victory and offered clemency to his rival aspirants if only they would surrender. They refused. And yet Luis and his team carried the day. While his fellows cheered at success, Luis could only stare at the fallen, regretting the price of each life lost along his journey. There would be one last test for Luis, individually determined by the Blood Angels overseeing the trials. He was brought into the place of challenge, and there, armed with a staff, was pitted against Florian, his friend, his brother. One place was left among the Blood Angels. For either to claim the spot, one must kill the other. To achieve his dream, he had to fight his oldest friend. Florian whispered, "I'm sorry," and flew at Luis. Training was one thing, fighting to the death another. Each blow traded sent shockwaves down their arms, each connecting strike a stab in the heart for these brothers. But there could only be one outcome. For Luis had listened and learned like a sponge absorbs water. A quick disarm, a couple of solid blows later, and Luis had his brother on the floor, spitting blood and breathing heavily.
"Now finish him. Why are you hesitating? Your position in the chapter hangs in the balance. Strike!"
"I will not slay him."
"What did you say?"
"I said I would not slay him."
"You would throw away your chance to become a servant of the Emperor, a space marine, one of the greatest warriors in the galaxy for the sake of him? You are a fool and not worthy of the gifts we would bestow. Kill him!"
"No. For him, I would abandon anything. He helped me when I needed help. He befriended me when I had no friends. He guided me when he could have left me. I will not repay his kindness with treachery. If that means I am not worthy, I do not care. Kill me."
"What of glory and of power? Surely a fair price for such things is one life."
"I did not come here for glory or for power. I came to serve. I will have no part of evil."
"Then you have passed."
This, the test of Horus, was Luis's final challenge. A test of loyalty and brotherhood, to ascertain whether his principles would endure and prevail against orders of atrocities by his superiors. The Blood Angels themselves prize this virtue greatly, not simply because it offers them a greater fraternity, a brotherhood of unbreakable power when working as one, but because of their gene curses. The strength of will required to do the right thing, even when ordered not to, is a pale imitation of the mental fortitude required to deny the red thirst. Florian, his friend, a last connection to a previous life, would not ascend to the ranks of the angels, nor would Luis as he was. For after arriving at the Arx Angelicum, the fortress of the Blood Angels on Baal itself, after 3 days of meditation he would imbibe the blood of the angel, then undergo the sleep of the sarcophagus, surrounded by bloody amniotics, and arise a blood angel. Luis entered the sarcophagus bone-weary and dog-tired, a pathetic example of humanity's baseline. Within that container, he explored the memories of Sanguinius, of the Horus heresy, of the nightmarish wars that raged millennia before his birth. He felt the betrayal of his brother Horus, experienced the anguish and horror of those days. He took into himself a sliver of Sanguinius. Luis the boy may have entered that sarcophagus, yet it was Dante who emerged. Reduced was his birth name, not gone, but no longer who he truly was. Now his angel name would take priority, become his whole being, his life. Now a neophyte of the 10th Company, an angel reborn, a legend waiting to be forged. Life as a Blood Angel is not an easy one. No Space Marines have an easy life. Theirs is a life of war, butchery, and bloodshed. On their toils and hardships is the Imperium protected. Superhuman warriors designed for the superhuman terrors and nightmares that lurk out among the galaxy. But occasionally on the surface it can seem so. Whereas other chapters deign to focus on methods of warfare, on stratagems and swordplay, the Blood Angels indulge in a greater number of activities beyond their training. Art, sculpture, music, philosophy. They learn and discuss the warrior's virtues and the angelic graces. Their blood-red attire can almost seem gaudy and lavish to many, the excesses of a chapter that wishes to bask in the glory of being of the founding legions. However, this is not the reason. In each step of their training, they learn to appreciate life, admire the small things, take care of the tiny details. This, alongside their angelic graces, shields them from the worst of what their chapter can wreak upon the galaxy, for they are cursed, in ways that far outstrip their brethren. Bright, noble, and glorious perhaps, but they hide a terrible thirst, one that Dante and his fellow neophytes experienced immediately. It is a thirst that no amount of water can slake. With each mouthful of water, the belly grows tauter, but it does not sustain, does not satisfy that dry mouth. The anticipation of the gums, the growling hunger of the gut. He would train, he would serve, and he would learn. It is a curse that can only be slaked by one thing: blood. The vitae of others. Whether controlled, willing, or ripped from the throats of enemies, it matters little the source, at least to some. For one such as Dante, with compassion and care at the forefront of his personality, it matters a great deal. The curse of the Blood Angels lay heavy upon him and would only grow heavier with time and regret. The greatest lesson of all would come at Holywell Hive, in the Halt system. For Dante and his brother Laziel were cut off within the endless depths of the corridors, shafts, and neglected warrens of the city. The Hive had been occupied by a Space Marine warband known as the Purge. Vicious, ruthless worshippers of Nurgle, they visited uncounted horrors onto the denizens of the Hive. In their latest battle for survival, Laziel was injured. They had to find egress, to rejoin their chapter brothers and regroup, to make the Purge pay for their obscenities. Only Laziel began to fall. Even while his injuries began to knit and heal, his mind spiraled down dark paths. Mutterings of the Legion, of the Palace, of Horus. The Black Rage was sinking its claws into his psyche. The clock was ticking. Escape the Hive, and perhaps the chaplains could rip him from the grasp of the dark curse. Or fail, and witness his brother turn on friend and foe alike in a maddened rage, as he relived the horrific events that took place over 10,000 years before. They enlisted the aid of some loyal survivors, those who believed in the Imperium's cause, who showed kindness to Dante and Laziel and led them through the labyrinthine tunnels to reach the surface. There, Dante demanded the civilians leave, for while his chapter was on the way, he feared for their lives. How could he repay these men's kindness with the danger that Laziel posed? Should Laziel fall while they were still in the vicinity, he would rip them apart like rag dolls. But he was not in time, for they had been followed. The monstrous Astartes of the Purge were tramping up the corridor behind them, eliminating any possibility of escape. Laziel lay against the wall in a fugue. The humans were too weak to contribute. Dante stood alone against 6 armored and armed Astartes. It was what he had been chosen for, trained for, created for, to become humanity's protector. Fury coursed through his veins like a molten fire. Anger became a purifying flame in his spirit, and he took the fight to the enemy, howling, crashing into them, slicing apart their armor and bodies with an incandescence that would intimidate a space wolf. Even the loss of his helm only fueled his frenzied wrath as the copper tang of blood and vitae erupted from the bodies of his slain enemies. The world dissolved into the madness of hot ichor and all-consuming crimson. The only end, when a golden angel appeared and granted him the release of unconsciousness. Awareness returned as his chapter reinforcements summoned him once more into wakefulness. But Dante could only focus on his fleeing memories. Recollections of blood and howls and screams, the acrid taste around and inside his mouth and throat, the cloying texture of harsh liquid still dripping down his armor. Around the chamber lay all but one of his human allies. The living one, injured, lay against the wall, eyes wide in shock and fear, muttering about a golden angel. The others lay dead, their faces an ashen white from exsanguination, their necks torn open in ragged wounds that had bled them dry. The heretic Astartes had not killed these men, nor even Laziel in his own madness. Dante had done this, to those who had offered their service, their help to aid himself. He had mindlessly torn them apart like a wolf tearing into lambs to sate a thirst that now tasted more bitter than it had ever been. Dante swore from that moment he would no longer partake of blood from a living host ever again. From this day, the thirst would forever be his greatest enemy. Scout, to brother, to sergeant, Dante's rise was legendary. All knew of his furious prowess in battle, his calm, controlled demeanor in command, his exemplary record. After the 5th Company's captain was killed by an Eldar in the Odrius Freeport, not one of the other sergeants questioned his suitability to assume battlefield command. As far as his men and peers were concerned, his captaincy was not merely earned, but overdue. It merely needed to be officiated. After the ceremony of captaincy was bestowed upon him, and he had undertaken the pains of the blessings of the host, he stood taller than he ever had before. He was Dante, Lord of the 5th Host, Keeper of the Arsenal, and Captain of the Demon Banes. There, he served faithfully and well, yet he was not destined to stay there, for soon he would find himself as captain of the Assault Company, the Lord of Skyfall. It was there he would face a harrowing reality that not only threatened the lives of his men, but the future of the Blood Angels entire. The Kallius Insurrection, a rebellion across an entire subsector that saw vast numbers of Blood Angels dispatched to aid their successor chapter, the Angels Numinous, cut a bloody toll in the Blood Angels' numbers. Weeks rolled into months, which cycled into years. More and more Blood Angels were dispatched to compensate for the punishing levels of war and casualties that the rebellion demanded. The price was high, the toll nearly too much to bear, but they were victorious. Together, the Blood Angels and the Angels Numinous held back the rebellious worlds, crushed systems that declared defiance against the Imperium, and survived until the arrival of reinforcements. Beaten, bloodied, and reduced in number, the Blood Angels regrouped aboard their ships. The brothers of the chapter needed respite. Armor required cleaning and repairing from the intense levels of damage wrought on their ceramite plating. Then a traitor fleet saw the opportunity to punish the Scions of Sanguinius, to wipe out the majority of their surviving battle brothers, and swept in without warning. Dante, captain of the 8th, was in the training cages at the time. His men, either also in the gymnasium or resting in private meditation or practices, were no more ready than he was for combat. Alarms blared out across the ship. The 8th Company raced to the armory to prepare for battle, yet there was no time, too few servitors, and too many unequipped Astartes. As they began to equip armor, power packs, weapons, ammunition, helmets, and all their apparatus of war, 3 Black Legion Terminators teleported near to the armory gates. These ancient warriors, garbed in the mightiest armor available to Astartes, wielded combi bolters and a heavy flamer. Meanwhile, the 8th Company were the Assault Company. Speed and surprise were their chief tactic. Their numbers were few, and many were not yet equipped for battle. It was a slaughter. It was only thanks to the actions of Dante that the entire company was not wiped out. Yet still a dozen of his brothers lay dead, and a dozen more lay injured. Across the fleet, similar actions had been taken. Strategic precision strikes with overwhelming power when the Blood Angels were at their weakest in millennia. Dante's determination and fortitude rallied the survivors. The sons of the Angel would not fall this day, not while he still drew breath. Piece by piece, they would form themselves together. While the Angels Numinous indeed saved the Blood Angels companies from annihilation during the counterattack, which lasted over 3 days, Dante and his men were credited with the taking and scuttling of at least 7 capital ships. But it was the aftermath of this particular incident that changed the universe forever. On the ship that had seen so many of their brothers slaughtered, The remaining Blood Angels of the fleet gathered together in the basilica. They barely filled a quarter of the room. The empty spaces echoed with the shades of brothers lost, a reminder of their close call with annihilation. The dust of near defeat floated through the room. The Marines stood in armor, still raw and damaged with the fire and fury of war. 200 Blood Angels. The chapter's survivors from the Kallius incident. Nearly all the Blood Angels left in the entire galaxy. The Council of Blood and Bone, once filled with 25 of the greatest chaplains, priests, and leaders of the Blood Angels, stood a mere 4 presiding over the ceremony. Before all of them stood Dante, captain of the 8th, and soon to be more. For there were no others left. Each and every company captain had fallen save him. There, not by dint of worth or recognition, nor by skill or regard, Dante ascended to chapter master amidst the worst defeat the Blood Angels had seen. In the ashes of his fallen brothers, of a shattered chapter, unworthy and unprepared for this moment, he assumed the mantle of responsibility that would sit upon his shoulders for the next millennium. He, the frail, sickly child of the irradiated wastes, became chapter master of one of the most ancient and lauded chapters in the Imperium because there was no one else. A dire situation, impossible odds, and grave circumstances lay before him. Would he fail? Would he doom his chapter? No. The strands of fate would not write this warrior into ignominy and shame. This, the greatest of all the Imperium sons, through sheer will and indomitable valor, would forge his chapter's future with glory and honor, secure the legacy of his gene-sire, and become more than merely a man, but the most legendary figure the Imperium had ever seen. He became Luis Dante, Lord of the Host, bringer of light, the Bane of Demons, and Sanguinius' greatest son. Time is a tricky thing within the Imperium of Man. Warp travel oft plays merry hell with standard chronology. Weeks becoming years, or years becoming days within the warp. All sense of linear advancement sent awry, corkscrewing into a spiral of madness that would drive any detail-obsessed individual into an apoplectic fit. Apoplectic fit? I've forgotten how to say that word. Ignore me, carry on. Many individuals have served centuries in official capacities. Yet in reality, their service in real space can be far less. Yet as with many things, time always tells. For approximately 1,100 years, Dante has been the chapter master of the Blood Angels. Over a millennia of protecting the Imperium of Man from the gravest threats imaginable. No other living space marine can lay claim to such a feat. And for those who may doubt his longevity, who may claim that such warp travel could imply that many of his years serving were merely weeks within the warp, his battle record speaks for itself. For no other individual has traversed across as many stars as this great sun. No other has marched into battles across the length and breadth of the galaxy. Pandemonium, Terion, Armageddon, across unimaginable distances he has been at the forefront of the galaxy's greatest warfronts. Forever shining as a golden beacon across the galaxy, an inspiration to his allies, and a death knell to his enemies. Demon lords, traitor warbands, rebel worlds, orc wars, fleet engagements, there are no arenas of war where Dante has not stood. In return, echoes of his legacy resound across the galaxy. Enormous statues raised up in gratitude, tapestries depicting his martial prowess, songs and stories that are heard across 1,000 worlds, all for this one man. But if there is one moment, one single defining moment that Dante will be remembered for, it is this. A time of testing, of near annihilation, when the Baal system itself was threatened, when a devouring, all-consuming tide of jaws and teeth blazed through the stars in order to end the existence of the chapter and the world where Sanguinius first strode. This, the greatest testing of those of the blood, and the conviction of Dante himself. The Devastation of Baal. The Tyranids were coming. Armadas of floating bioships surrounded by the swarming of a billion lesser organisms raced through the dark. They swept over worlds that should have held the strength to withstand anything the galaxy could throw at them. They preyed upon vessels in the void, the shadow in the warp racing ahead of them like a dark shroud across their path. These were not Tyranids as we know them. The insatiable hunger, the implacable urge to consume each and every world in their path. This Hive fleet was racing through the stars, making a beeline for one system in particular. The home of Sanguinius, the base of the Blood Angels. They were coming for Baal. The largest single Hive fleet ever encountered was approaching like a bloodhound with a kill scent fresh in its nose. Baal and its moons became alive in a hurricane of logistics, fortifications and supplies. It would take more than a chapter to defend this system. The common stock of humanity, aspirants to be, failed aspirants, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, any and all capable bodies were brought in to aid the efforts. Baal had shaped Sanguinius, and now all of Baal would stand to defend his legacy. But it would not be enough. It would never be enough. And so Dante issued a call, a cry in the blackness, before Baal was cut off entirely by the shadow in the warp that the Tyranids brought. A message to all those of the blood, to every chapter descended from the great angel, a plea to his brother chapters across the galaxy. Aid us. And they came. Aside from the Lamenters, who, already few in number, were doing battle with the Tyranids on the other side of the galaxy, each and every brother chapter of the blood came. Flesh Tearers, Blood Drinkers, Carmine Blades, Knights of Blood, Brothers of the Red, Blood Dragons, Red Knights, even the Angels Vermilion, with whom Dante had cut ties centuries before, arrived. Their small complement arriving in direct contravention with their orders. So many Sons of the Blood brought together for this, the greatest trial of the Angel's legacy. Such a gathering defies belief. The forces and power of so many Space Marines gathered in one location, all under the command of one man. But consider for a moment Dante. A hero, a legend, an implacable warrior, but still just a man. Transhuman, enhanced certainly, but born of humanity's stock. He was ancient already. A millennia of service, duty and battle. Wearing the mantle of responsibility of his chapter, Sanguinius' legacy, the continuation of what was once a legion. This burden could cripple a man. And now it was so much more. For not only was he defending the home of Sanguinius and the Blood Angels, but so many other chapters had joined the defense, joined his command. Some came few in number, others contributed multiple companies to the fight. Now their legacy fell onto Dante's shoulders. Should he lose, how many chapters of the blood would be near depletion? Should he fail, how many would curse his name for frivolously wasting the legacy of the angel on a mere single system? All his glories, his victories, his successes over the past 1,000 years would be for naught. He would have been remembered for one thing and one thing only: the decimation of Sanguinius' bloodline and the loss of his world. We so often focus on the incredible physical capabilities of Space Marines, their strength, their speed, their ferocity, that too often we forget the burdens of command upon the mind. The mental fortitude required to take responsibility and divvy out orders, knowing and understanding the costs. Something that perhaps the Ultramarines have not yet forgotten, and appears to serve them well. Warriors of red and black and gold gathered on Baal and its moons. The Arx Angelicum, the Blood Angels' fortress monastery, was armed, supplied and fortified. Ancient relic walls were unearthed and built up to create miles of defences. Thirstwater, a vicious living weapon from the dark age of technology, was employed to defend the perimeter. Thousands upon thousands of normal humans gathered, ready to face the oncoming swarm. Across the Arx Angelicum, the Void Shield hummed with power. In orbit, the Tyranid Hive fleet arrived, enormous bloated cargo carriers containing multitudes of organisms, ravening jaws at the ready, claws and teeth prepared to rip and tear and shred, strange bioweapons connected as part of their living bodies, chitin protecting them from the worst of physical attacks. Large and small, aggressive and defensive, flightless and winged, united and separate. The hunger of the hive mind had come. The moment of consumption was upon them. The orbit of the system rained with fire and blood. The Blood Angels' fleet crashed into the Tyranids like a wave of death, knowing that with each ship destroyed, the defenders of the planet and its moons stood a little more of a chance. Lances, gun batteries, broadsides, explosions of plasma and fire lit up the skies. Slowly, one by one, the fleet was pushed back, ripped and torn apart by the unstoppable waves of the Tyranid ships. Thousands died upon those vessels. Dante wore each one with determination, knowing that they died so that he and his ilk may live, that he had sent them into that hellish maelstrom, knowing they would pay the price. Yet his burden would only grow greater. The Hive fleet's forces landed. Mycetic spores dropped Tyranid organisms onto the sands of the planet and moons. Gargoyles darkened the skies with a million wing beats. The planet shook beneath the tread of a trillion new creatures born of a singular mind and purpose. Death to the Angel and his sons. It was a brutal, brutal battle. Thirstwater claimed gaunts by the thousands. Heavy weapons batteries took apart biotitans in explosions of gore and viscera. Orbital batteries annihilated ships, disgorging their hellish spawn over the skies of Baal. In any other battle, victory would have lain clearly with the defenders. But for each and every Tyranid destroyed, 5 more appeared to take their place. Even the Death Company, 100 strong, was released into the fray, screaming hateful obscenities at the oncoming Tyranid swarm, witnessing visions of the Horus Heresy. Tearing apart traitors that existed within their own heads, they sold their lives, ripping apart Tyrannofexes and warriors with abandon, their last glorious gift of violence to the defenders of Arx Angelicum. Yet Dante ordered a battle of continuing retreat, to cost the Tyranids as much as they could and to muster their strength for the final battle. For he knew it would come to the last moments. A noble, final stand, protecting their place of sanctity until the last man fell. There was no other option. But he would bleed the Tyranids dry, so that if another Imperial fleet encountered the Hive swarm, they may stand more of a chance once he and his ilk were gone. Gathered behind the void shields of the Arx Angelicum, Dante prepared his warriors for a siege. In any other battle, against any other foe, it would have been the most redoubtable fortress in the galaxy. Thousands of space marines, millions of mortals, heavy weapons batteries by the hundreds, all sheltered beneath the glowing void shield. Yet for the Tyranids, it would be a matter of numbers and of time. Until the unthinkable happened, for the enemy were already inside. They slaughtered the slumbering aspirants within their sarcophagi, damning the chapter's potential future warriors and drawing out Dante to their protection, while others sabotaged the void shields that protected the Arx. Its function broken, the void shield collapsed. The Tyranids rushed in on wing, hoof and claw to throw themselves at the fortress. Battle after battle ensued. Space Marines fell in their hundreds as the overwhelming numbers of the Tyranids soaked up the defenders' fire with their bodies, and the ravening hordes came on. Dante fought as an echo of the Great Angel himself, his custom jump pack sending him soaring through the skies on wings of flame. He and his sanguinary guard struck hard and struck fast. They shredded the most fearsome of beasts, reinforced failing sections, and took sparse moments for rest. Yet Dante was not his father. Though he wore the visage of the Primarch and fully embraced his nobility and savagery in equal measure, he could not be everywhere. Building by building, they were pushed back. Masterpieces of craftsmanship that had stood for millennia fell into ruin from bolt and claw. Countless artworks of legendary provenance were lost as his forces retreated to the citadel proper. What could have been a protracted defense had rapidly turned into a slaughter in their own place of strength. Until something impossible happened. The warp heaved, stretched, and tore throughout the galaxy. Every son of the blood, touched with a fragment of Sanguinius' psychic might, reeled at the shockwave. Their throats erupted in screams of agony, and weapons dropped from limp hands for a brief few moments. Many fell into unconsciousness, or the Black Rage. But that was nothing compared to the Tyranids. For the first time, the Hive mind tasted death. The warp fire of the ether, torn into the material realm, burned at the gestalt web of the Tyranids' hive mind. Thousands of them were instantly killed, their brainstems engulfed in the backlash of psychic power that struck the hive mind. Trillions more were snapped from the hive mind's control, becoming wild animals. No more a concerted army, but a rabble of wild things, snapping at each other, shredding apart themselves in undirected anger and confusion. Briefly, the hive mind fell into silence. 6 days. It took 6 days for the hive mind to rebuild itself and reassert its dominance over its ravening masses. 6 glorious days of sorties and advances and tactical maneuverings that saw the warriors of the blood punish the Tyranids for the slaughter of their brothers. But now the hive mind gathered once more. The shadow in the warp was falling again, and a beacon of the Tyranids' control was gathering around a nexus of sorts. A single being, perhaps even the only being on Baal still capable of directing the hive mind's control. One last tactic, one last battle, one last rage against the dying of the light, a final spit in the eye of fate, and to let the galaxy know that while the sons of the blood still draw breath, the fight continues. Dante ordered one last glorious charge. The Tower of Amareo was opened to unleash the fury of the twisted abominations of space marines that were kept under guard in that hellish place, and directed towards the masses of Tyranids. There, just behind the gibbering, maddened, brutish mutants, Dante in all his glory led the defiant sortie. He embraced the thirst that he had withheld for so long. He allowed it to soak through his system, to power his muscles, and to wreak death and destruction upon the Tyranids. He was a glorious and terrible figure to witness. There, in the throes and fog of the thirst, came a blinding light and a terrible darkness. For there floated the Sanguinor, the beacon of Sanguinius' purity, come at last to direct the Blood Angels where they needed to go. All fought with a dedicated zeal to reach their target. By their side came legions of dark-armored space marines whose armor burned with etheric fire. The Legion of the Damned had come to support Dante in his final battle. Through a tidal wave of blood and death, Dante advanced. By his sides were his brethren, locked in mists of red and black rage, the twisted forms of the mutants of the Tower of Amareo, and the dark, silent figures of the Legion of the Damned. They rallied to the Sanguinor. For beyond the legions of broodlords and behind the mists of the battlefield, there stood the figure of a mighty ancient swarmlord, a beast of incredible power, cunning and ferocity. There, Dante stood alone. He fought like a whirlwind. 1,500 years of experience and skill made his every move a killing blow. His equipment, an iron halo, a petition pistol, and his axe mortalis made him one of the deadliest warriors within the entire galaxy. His jump pack launched him in unpredictable trajectories, allowing him to attack from new angles and control the initiative. Yet this was no mere monster. The Swarmlord met each attack with one of its own. Its bone saws raked out faster than any could blink. Its armor was thick and strong. No matter how Dante attacked, he could not slay this monster, could not weaken it. There, alone on the world of Baal, the Swarmlord pierced Dante on a bone sword, shredding his secondary heart and pinning him on the blade. The Swarmlord, picked up the commander of the Blood Angels, the Lord of Hosts, and gazed into his golden visage, ready for the final blow. Dante spoke his final words.
My service is done. I give thanks. My life is finished. I give thanks. Blood returns to blood. Another will take up my burden in my stead. I give thanks.
With that, he disengaged the safety of his perdition pistol and burned away the Swarm Lord's skull. The fusion beam tore apart and liquefied the monster's brainstem, and with it, the control of the tyrannid hordes on Baal. Slumping to the ground, blood trickled from his failing body. Yet he had no fear, no regrets, no qualms. He had given a score of lifetimes to his Imperium, soul, spirit, and body. His only goal, to hold back the endless dangers in the dark, to buy the Imperium a few more years with each victory. And he had succeeded in that hundreds of times over. For the last century, he had fought on in determination, telling himself that he could be the prophesied one to sacrifice himself before the Golden Throne and save the Emperor, forcing himself to not give in, for he may be called to greater service. There on the sands of Baal, he laughed at his arrogance, and finally let go. A lifetime of service would end, and perhaps now he would go forth and meet his Primarch at last, or drift away into the blackness of infinity. He had been tired for so long. Now he could rest. He opened his eyes once more. The warm cocoon of death surrounded him. The pain from his chest was gone. Before him stood the Sanguinor, the herald of Sanguinius, who simply gestured for Dante to look. There stood Sanguinius, the father that he had never known, the greatest of the Emperor's sons, wrapped in perfect golden light. There, his father thanked him for his service, his sacrifice, and said that he would grant him peace, take away his pain and bring him unto his side. Dante begged for the freedom that death would offer him. With a sorrow that would make the hardest of hearts weep, Sanguinius refused. He could not spare Dante, for he was still needed among the living. His hands reached out and banished the peaceful warmth of death from his limbs and filled Dante with pain and agony. Even as Dante was wrested back to his body on Baal, he screamed and begged to go with his father, as a child watches a parent walk away. There he stood, injured and in pain, pushed to the limits of his endurance, a man cursed to live by dint of his skill and dedication, a man longing for death, but forced to continue. There he met strange saviours, for a whole host of new Marines had arrived, many bearing the colours of Sanguinius, others bearing the blue of the Ultramarines. Some he knew, others were larger, wielding different weapons of a new age. A turning point, a change in the balance of power among the galaxy. There it was he met the Primarch himself, the Avenging Son, the Imperial Regent Roboute Guilliman, who bade him stand. Never, he commanded, would Dante debase himself by kneeling before him. Dante was one of the few in the Imperium who had earned the right to meet the Primarch on an equal footing. For while they heralded from different ages, Roboute from a time of unity and enlightenment, Dante from an age of darkness and oppression, Dante had served unflinchingly for over 1,500 years of non-stop battle and tragedy, a culmination of experience that could nearly well match the Primarch's experiences out of stasis. And now they had both returned from the death, after a fashion. And perhaps, while this may be my own personal headcanon, Roboute saw more of his brother in Dante than he did in any other. A noble warrior, a suffering son, a glorious melancholy shrouded by the mantle of responsibility. both dangerous and beautiful in equal measure. While Dante may have been a pale imitation of his brother, he possessed a resonance that Guilliman missed from over 10,000 years ago. There, Dante, overwhelmed with fatigue, pain, the forced return to life, and the meeting a Primarch of myth and legend, collapsed. Now Dante is needed more than ever. The Indomitus fleet returned to the galaxy at large, bringing worlds back into compliance, spreading the technology of Primaris Marines to chapters to tearing on the edge of destruction. Leaving Dante on Baal, but not leaving him alone. For Dante has been named the Warden of Imperial Nihilus, the commander of all Imperial forces north of the Great Rift. Now he does not shoulder the burdens of a mere chapter, nor the future of all the chapters of the blood, but of half the galaxy entire. Upon his decisions will worlds be taken, reinforced, lost or destroyed. Trillions of lives are held at the whim of his battle strategies. Baal would be reinforced, built to become a capital world, like a shade of terror half a galaxy away. Under his command would be tens of thousands of legionaries, newborn reinforcements, desperate to save their galaxy. Dante has believed himself to be a shade of his Primarch for so long. A pale imitation. A cheap copy designed to inspire lesser minds. Now he truly is the angel the Imperium needs. He is, in every way that counts, Sanguinius reborn. But none shall ever know of his weaknesses and his fears. Those he shall keep unto himself. Which, to this humble narrator, makes him even more like his father, the great angel. I would have stopped here, should circumstances allow. It is a fitting picture of our protagonist Dante, the small, frail child of the Salt Wastes, now forced to protect half of the Imperium, completely cut off from the light of the Astronomicon and Terra. Yet there are two more things that must be mentioned. Firstly, he has been rejuvenated. After the devastation of Baal and the eventual crossing of Mephiston across the Rubicon Primaris, Dante himself has undergone the procedure and become a Primaris Space Marine. New strength and size has flooded his body, and perhaps ensured that this ancient Space Marine may serve with new fervour for centuries to come. The second, and perhaps most important of all, is that he has spoken with not just one, but two Primarchs. For it was Dante who arrived at the call of the Lion, who recently reawakened was forming his own protectorate of stars within Imperium Nihilus. A Primarch who cursed this age of darkness and superstition, who believed that his father's Imperium was lost to politicking and sycophancy. There, Dante, an echo of the Lion's lost brother, brought to him the news. While the Lion mourned his isolation in the galaxy, his own despair and self-doubt of why he survived when his brothers did not, Dante brought the news to him that Roboute still lived, that Guilliman was marching through the Imperium pushing back the darkness where he could, that the Lion was no longer alone. Dante is an incredible character. While a huge number of Space Marines are painted as being too angry to die, he is truly one of the more human characters, and as a result of this, suffers more because of it. Personally, I find it a lovely taste of the grim dark, that simply being a bit more human, a bit more empathetic, leads to more personal suffering in this horrendous place. But more than that, he endures despite his wishes. After all, only in death does duty end. And Dante has a lot more to do in the universe of Warhammer 40k. With that said, thank you for listening. Please do drop a like, comment or subscribe, and constructive criticism is always welcome, for without you, no one would be listening. Now do enjoy your day or night, and I hope you've indulged in some escapism from reality, for that's why we are here, isn't it? Until next time.